protesters are gathering outside a Chicago detention center where hundreds of migrants are being held.
4 officers were injured and 21 people were arrested after a fight broke out.
Authorities say several people have already been detained after violent clashes with police.
Chicago witnessed one of most violent clashes when ICE officers found themselves surrounded. Agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, entered the Little Village neighborhood early Tuesday morning with warrants for multiple deportable felons tied to a cartel-linked fugitive network. But before the agents could make contact, word spread through the area. Within minutes, crowds filled the streets, shouting, throwing objects, and blocking vehicles from moving in or out. What began as a lawful operation quickly turned into a mob confrontation, with federal officers trapped in a city that has declared itself a sanctuary jurisdiction. Witness videos posted to social media captured the sound of gunfire, and the moment a black Jeep rammed an ICE vehicle before crashing during its escape attempt, federal officials called it the most violent resistance to immigration enforcement in recent memory. According to early reports, the ICE operation targeted 5 high-risk fugitives, all Mexican nationals previously deported for felony narcotics and weapons charges. Intelligence suggested the group had re-entered the United States under false identities and was using Chicago's sanctuary policies to avoid detection. The suspects were linked to a Sinaloa cartel distribution line, responsible for pushing fentanyl and heroin shipments into the Midwest through local dealers. When ICE agents arrived near 26th Street and Kedzie Avenue, they were met not by fugitives, but by organized resistance. Protesters, some carrying handheld radios, blocked the roads and surrounded agents. DHS later confirmed that several of the agitators were part of an activist network called La Defensa del Pueblo, known for interfering in prior immigration arrests. As the standoff grew, the crowd's aggression escalated. Federal vehicles were rammed and spray-painted. Agents were hit with bricks, bottles, and pepper spray, and at least one gunman opened fire from inside the black Jeep that sped toward the convoy. Chicago police units arrived minutes later, but by then, the ICE team had been forced into defensive formation, returning limited fire and calling for tactical backup. It went from a warrant to a war zone in under 3 minutes, one agent said. "We were outnumbered, outflanked and outgunned in the middle of a sanctuary city." The confrontation marks a major flashpoint in the ongoing battle between federal law enforcement and sanctuary state policies that limit cooperation with ICE. Officials say local non-compliance, combined with public resistance, allows violent repeat offenders to slip through the cracks. What stunned investigators most, however, was the coordination. DHS sources say encrypted chat groups and live alerts warned fugitives of ICE's arrival in real time, suggesting deliberate obstruction by outside organizers. This wasn't spontaneous outrage, one official said. It was a planned ambush. When the confrontation reached its breaking point, Operation Sanctuary Break descended into chaos. As ICE convoys turned onto West 26th Street, they were immediately met by an organized crowd, hundreds of people, many masked, waving flags and chanting anti-enforcement slogans. The lead unit was trapped between 2 vehicles as a black Jeep Cherokee sped in from the intersection, swerving toward agents. The driver shouted, "You're not taking anyone!" before slamming into the side of an ICE transport van. Agents barely escaped injury. Moments later, gunfire cracked across the block. Federal reports confirmed that at least 9 rounds struck ICE and DHS vehicles. Agents returned limited suppressive fire while calling for tactical reinforcements. One officer was struck by debris but not seriously injured. The gunman fled but crashed 2 blocks away and was later captured after a brief foot chase. The suspect, identified as a Mexican national with prior deportation orders, had multiple felony drug and firearm convictions. Agents said he wasn't alone. He had helped protesters hurled bricks, paint cans, and glass bottles from rooftops and alleyways. A haze of pepper spray and tear gas filled the air as federal units fought to maintain control. Video footage shows civilians forming human chains to block escape routes for fugitives, allowing several to hide in nearby apartments. Agents later found makeshift barricades made from garbage bins and construction debris deliberately dragged into the street to slow emergency responders. "This was not a protest," said one ICE tactical commander. "It was a battlefield." By midday, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, confirmed 12 arrests, including the alleged shooter, several obstruction suspects, and 2 agitators who assaulted federal officers. DHS also stated that at least 5 fugitives from the original target list were successfully detained. Each had prior deportation orders and narcotics warrants stretching back years. Several of those arrested were living under false names and had benefited from local sanctuary policies that prevented prior cooperation with federal detainers. But even as ICE celebrated the arrests, the situation escalated further, this time in court. Hours after the operation, a federal judge in Illinois ordered ICE to release 13 detainees under the 2022 consent decree that restricts warrantless immigration arrests in sanctuary jurisdictions. The ruling triggered outrage from law enforcement. "We risk our lives making these arrests," one DHS official said, "and the courts send them right back out." Legal analysts said the decree, intended to protect civil rights, now creates loopholes for violent repeat offenders to walk free. Officials warned that more than 600 detainees across Illinois could soon qualify for release under similar technicalities, effectively nullifying ICE's enforcement ability in entire regions. The political fallout was immediate. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker publicly sided with activists, condemning excessive federal aggression and pledging to defend Illinois sanctuary protections. That statement drew fierce backlash from federal agencies. ICE leadership called the state's response an open invitation to organized lawlessness. The Department of Justice released a statement clarifying that federal law supersedes local sanctuary ordinances and that obstruction of federal agents is a felony offense. Behind closed doors, DHS officials described Chicago as the most difficult enforcement environment in the country. One agent summarized the sentiment bluntly: "They've turned law enforcement into the enemy and the criminals into martyrs." As the dust settled, the attack was being analyzed not just as a riot, but as a coordinated attempt to resist federal authority. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was briefed within hours, while federal prosecutors began drafting civil disorder and conspiracy charges for those identified in the crowd footage. ICE Command vowed that the response to the violence would be swift and uncompromising. The agency's message to offenders was clear: you can block the streets, you can shout, you can throw bottles, but you cannot stop federal law. In the aftermath of the violence, investigators pieced together a clearer and more disturbing picture of what happened in Little Village. Body cam footage revealed that several activists had intentionally positioned women and children between ICE agents and the suspects, using them as human shields to block enforcement. Federal agents described scenes of mothers holding toddlers in front of doorways, while suspects slipped out through back exits. "They call it protection," said one ICE officer, "but it's obstruction. They used innocent lives to cover for criminals." DHS confirmed that the footage will be entered as evidence in a federal obstruction and endangerment case against several activists believed to have coordinated the interference. Officials said the act was unmistakably deliberate, timed to trigger media backlash and create confusion during live enforcement. But beyond the street-level violence, Operation Sanctuary Break exposed the larger crisis brewing beneath Chicago's sanctuary framework. Federal analysts revealed that sanctuary protections have turned the city into a safe haven for international fugitives, not just undocumented families. In the last 18 months, over 3,000 foreign nationals with prior deportation or criminal histories have resettled in Cook County, many under government-funded housing and healthcare programs. ICE reports that nearly 40% of those rearrested in the area had active warrants for violent crimes, from drug trafficking and assault to weapons violations. The state's "don't cooperate" mandate means local jails no longer notify ICE when such offenders are released. "They walk out the front door," one DHS official said, "and the next day we're chasing them again until someone gets hurt." Federal economists added another layer to the fallout: cost. Sanctuary-related spending in Illinois surpassed $1.2 billion last year, including housing, welfare, and legal aid for undocumented migrants. Homeland Security analysts say that these incentives, combined with non-enforcement policies, have created a pull factor, attracting criminal migrants from over a dozen countries, including Russia, Central America, and East Asia. For cartels, Chicago has become a logistics hub, an American city where fugitive traffickers can blend in under the protection of local law. The cartels don't need tunnels here, one DEA source said. They use policy as their cover. Inside DHS, officials now view Operation Sanctuary Break as a turning point in federal immigration enforcement. The agency has authorized the formation of new tactical field teams designed specifically to enter sanctuary jurisdictions under federal authority. These units will operate under direct supervision of Washington's Office of Homeland Operations, bypassing state-level cooperation altogether. If a city won't protect its people, one ICE commander said, we will. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors in Illinois have begun drafting civil disorder and racketeering charges against individuals who coordinated the mob's actions. Surveillance and drone footage show several protest organizers issuing real-time directions via radio. Evidence that federal lawyers believe will justify conspiracy enhancements. The message from Washington came sharp and cold. In a rare joint statement, the FBI, ICE, and DHS called the Little Village riot an act of organized resistance to federal law. The agencies warned that future assaults on immigration officers will trigger federal terrorism-level prosecutions. Within 24 hours of the attack, ICE deployed reinforcements under the codename Operation Sanctuary Break, expanding raids across Cicero, Berwyn, and Aurora to pursue suspects linked to the mob and their criminal protectors. This is no longer about immigration, one senior official said. It's about national sovereignty and the rule of law. As armored convoys rolled out of Chicago that night, the message from federal command was unmistakable. You can hide behind crowds, cars, or politics, but you can't hide from federal law.